Yes, and you just discussed Iran, and it's been kind of quietly reported that Iran has actually agreed to help us in this quote-unquote war on terror. So before we get into the finances, what do you see as their end game in Eurasia? I mean, obviously we still have troops in Afghanistan, we still have troops in Iraq. They don't seem to be going anywhere. But now that we're really gutting the economy of our supposed greatest ally there, Saudi Arabia, we have people moving out in droves in Dubai who thought that this was going to be the new super center for the elites, and they thought they could get in on the ground level. Meanwhile, in that place, if you have debt and you can't pay that debt, they'll come after you criminally, and you'll literally do time in prison. It's not like here in the United States where you basically just have to get, pay them back or liens on what you own. I mean, you go to prison there. What will happen to Eurasia within the next couple of years?
Oh, every bit of this is for the purpose of what I have said for the past 35 years, since I lived with the elite for 3 years. And I've said over all of these years, the name of the game is control. It is a diabolical, wicked control factor. These people, some of the people that I rubbed shoulders with at Prudhoe Bay, they were so wealthy they could have written $1 million check every day for the rest of their life and never spent their fortune. It's not all about money. It's about the control of humanity and nations and people and Congress and the Arabs. And he said to me, Chaplain, we are going to bankrupt OPEC. And I said, well, how are you going to keep the price of crude oil down? He said, we're going to do it by opening up 2 other oil fields in the world if necessary. He said, we'll keep the price down to around $50. I was amazed, Jason, when they went to $33. He never told me that. Mm-hmm. But he said, we're going to keep it about $50 a barrel. It may fluctuate a little bit either side, and it'll stay that way. By the way, this is a prediction. It will stay that way for the next year to a year and a half. He said it would. And it's going to stay around $50 a barrel. He said, we will bankrupt OPEC, the present oil-producing countries of the world. We're going to bring on 2 new oil fields in the world. If the price starts to go up again, we'll bring these oil fields on in order to so flood the world with cheap oil that we can keep it around $50 a barrel. You want to know where those 2 fields are? I'm still shuddered to think of what he said. He said, a field north of Russia. And he said, in Indonesia, north of Russia. Oh, Immediately my mind started going so fast. I said, what do you mean north of Russia? First of all, they're going to bankrupt Russia, just like the other oil-producing countries of the world. After all, they've devalued their currency 9 times. They've had to close their stock market numerous times. Russia is in big problems. People ask me whenever I mention this, they say, do you mean that the elite of the world literally control Russia? Yes, they do. They right now have them under their thumb, and they'll keep them there until they've gotten them so submissive. Until then, they will make them again by bringing on this huge oil field in the northern part of Russia, flood the world with this crude oil, and in turn are going to bring about the making of Russia again. We are going to have them as the great Iron Curtain again. They are going to be one of our greatest problems in future days. I went on to say all these things. The elite have it planned. And in Indonesia, they basically will break one society and make another. And this is what they've done all down through the years. They did it after World War I, after World War II, dividing up the world, and they're doing it again. They are destroying one culture in order to build 2 more cultures.
This is just riveting stuff, Lindsey. So what you're telling me basically is that Russia will again be the great enemy of the United States, the other superpower?
That's what I gathered from what this gentleman had to say. But what they're going to do with America, Jason, it's so startling on how they're going to do it. And I've been sitting, after this gentleman told me what he did, I was so appalled until I was scared to death. Mm-hmm. I later called him back and asked him, I said, sir, of all the things that you told me, can I say that Lindsey Williams believes these things are going to happen? And he said, well, sure, why not? After all, it's going to happen anyway. There's nothing anybody can do about it. I was so appalled at what this man had told me. For 6 weeks' time, I didn't do a single radio show. I didn't take a speaking engagement. I literally disappeared from the world. I was scared. And one day I called up a friend of mine, and a very elderly, wonderful, godly gentleman, and I said, what do I do? I'm sitting here with the knowledge of everything that the elite plan to do in the world for the next year to year and a half. I can't I can't sleep. I can't stand myself. What do I do? I've got to tell him. He said, well, did the gentleman give you his phone number? I said, yes. He said, call him and ask him if you can say those things. And then it's when he said, sure, why not? Doesn't matter. It's going to happen anyway. Well, I've begun doing it, and that's the reason I'm on your show tonight. I want to warn the American people what you have in store and the world for the next year to a year and a half.
Now, on the other side, we're going to start getting into what they have planned for the United States economy within the next 6 months to a year. But before that, why don't you let people know where they can get your information, Lindsey?
Well, I produced two different things. I'm so alarmed over all of this, and it depends on what you'd like to get. If you want to know everything, I mean, from 1960 through 2009, I have an 8 DVD CD set. If you only want to know what's happening right now today on Thursday the 9th of April, I've got a 4 DVD CD set. The number is 800-321-2900. And by the way, my CDs and DVDs are not copywritten. I do that on purpose. I don't have time to be greedy. I plead with you to copy them and give them to your friends and neighbors everywhere you can. 800-321-2900.
And folks, that's how you can tell somebody is truly genuine, when they are willing to put their hard work out there into the public for free. He's saying, please get my videos, make copies, hold screenings, tell people this information. I mean, is anybody out there? Are you listening? This is important stuff. We'll be back after this with Pastor Lindsey Williams. It's the InfoWarrior with Jason Bermas, PrisonPlanet.tv, Infowars.com. We are privileged to have Pastor Lindsey Williams with us this evening for a whole another hour. And we're going to take your calls coming up in the next hour. The call line is 866-582-9933 if you have a question for Pastor Lindsey Williams. Lindsey, what do they have in store for the U.S. economy in the next 6 to 12 months?
The OPEC oil-producing countries of the world have lost 3/4 of their income in 4 months' time. This includes Russia also, even though not a part of OPEC. As a result, how does it affect America? I'll answer your question. We have an approximately $12 trillion national debt that they admit to. We're going to chalk up another $2 trillion deficit this year, and that means about $14 trillion. Now, the debt doesn't matter. Believe me. Congress knows this. That's the reason they just keep chalking it up. It could go to $15 trillion. It could go to 20, 25, 50 trillion. Wouldn't matter. It's not the debt that matters. It's the interest on the debt that must be paid. Now, how does the United States of America pay the interest on its national debt? The Treasury of the United States issues what is called T-bills. They are the reserve currency of the world. They could be depended on when nothing else works. All the nations of the world have bought them as long as anyone is known. But they've held them. It's a rainy day currency. It's like you would go down to the bank and say, I may have a time in life that I have a problem. I want to have something to back up on. They could back up on Treasury bills when all the other currencies in the world failed. So as a result, they bought T-bills. For the purchase of T-bills by others, apart from the Treasury of the United States of America, the Treasury issues them. This pays the interest on the national debt, and the world holds these as their backup reserve currency. Last week, the Federal Reserve stepped in. The Federal Reserve, who is not an agency of the federal government any more than Federal Express is, and they stepped in last week and for the first time in the history of the United States of America bought $23.5 billion of T-bills in 1 week. They've never done this before. Why? Because the nations of the world are not buying our T-bills anymore. They're not showing up when the Treasury issues them. And without this, the interest on the national debt is not paid, and the dollar would collapse. They knew this. So rather than let the dollar collapse, the Federal Reserve stepped in and bought the T-bills, and there was 3 issues, I believe, last week. Most every week there's about that many. Now, what is going to happen then? As a result of this, when the nations of the world get the message that nobody's buying our T-bills, the oil-producing countries can't afford to buy them because they've lost 3/4 of their income in 4 months' time, and because of this, you will see, positively, you will see a collapse of the dollar. America will see, and so I asked this gentleman this question, and I'm going to quote him verbatim because it's so important. I asked him the question, I said, all right, this is going to happen, then what is the result of this in the United States of America? You can depend on this within the next year to a year and a half. He said, quote, America will see a financial collapse that will be so great that it will take years to come out of it. And at that point, I asked him, I said, sir, are you talking about a 1929 depression-type situation? He said, Chaplain, don't you use those words. I mean, these people can be very abrupt when they want to. He said, don't you say that. He said, I did not use that word. Have you noticed they don't want to talk about a recession? They don't want to talk about a depression. They stay away from these words. And this man corrected me very quickly 8 months ago. He said, Chaplain, I said America will see a financial collapse that will be so great that it will take years to come out of it. Basically, what you're saying is there is coming a time when you'll have to take a wheelbarrow load of dollar bills, paper, to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread.
Just incredible. So we want to find out what more will happen. I mean, is this really going to happen? Are we going to be having dollars that are worth toilet paper? I mean, that's what Max Kaiser said last night on the program. We'll be back.